Hello, good afternoon. Hello, how are we? Got my coffee here. My day is just finally getting started. Hello, how is everyone? What is going on? Me and my coffee. Hello. Okay. How is everyone doing today? I am it's crazy. I it's been raining like crazy here the past few days, and yeah, our Wi-Fi and internet has been going in and out all morning. And as we get closer to freaking hurricane season down here, I'm like, oh God, this is gonna be the daily. I hope not. If you are hiding on live with me, please say hello, drop me a comment. I love to know who is tuning in. Friends. Okay. I'm so freaking excited. Okay. So, we are chatting about creating characters that readers freaking love today. Okay. And I'm really excited for this conversation. Um, so, thank you so much for being here. Hi to all of my clients who are watching. I love you. Thank you so much for being here. Hello, friends and new faces. If you're new to my world, welcome. I'm so happy to have you. This is a really special week, actually, for me. So, I decided over the weekend that I was going to do 5 days of lives in the Facebook group because I started the Facebook group like only 2 months ago with like 90 people in it. And now we are we're over 400. That is the milestone I celebrated, but literally, like, guys, we are 20 people away from 500 friends in this group, which is so mind-blowing and exciting to me. So to celebrate, I want to give you all the information, all of the juiciness, and give you guys a ton of value for just being a part of this community because I love you all. So for those who don't know me, I am Lo. I'm the owner and operator of the Creative Writers Studio. I run our lovely Creative Writers community. Hello, James. Hi, Fidel. How are you? Thanks for tuning in, guys. So when I first actually started this business a few years ago, I was really in the business of helping people share their stories. So I started my business actually writing autobiographies, writing self-help books, and then I started branching out into like memoirs and fictional stuff. And then, like, literally not long after that, I was taking on clients who wanted to write fictional stories. And to be totally honest, my fictional repertoire, not the best, right? So I had to really apply myself. I really had to learn a whole bunch of new skills. I had to learn a whole bunch of new information. And I really struggled at first. I really had trouble finding my footing, really understanding how to tell a story. So that was a huge learning curve for me and really important to how I was able to grow my business so that it was a successful freelance writing business. And now my goal, now that I know how to write all of these memoirs, fantasy stories, adventures, romances, freaking rom-coms, crime novels, like literally you name it, I have probably written it at some point. And through all of these different iterations of my business, one thing that has always really rung true for me and what I believe is really my purpose in the world is to help people tell their stories. When I started freelance writing and ghostwriting, it was really about helping people tell their stories, like by writing it for them. But then I realized there's all of these writers out there who have the ideas, who have the drive and desire to learn these things for themselves so that they can write whatever freaking book they comes to mind. So I've seriously been on a mission since the start of 2022 to coach 100 writers on finishing their book this year. So we are making really good headway on this goal, actually. And I am so freaking pumped. Okay. Well, that is enough chatty chat about me. Let's dive into creating these characters. Okay, so why is it important to have an interesting character? I mean, you guys could probably tell me, right? Like, why don't you throw in the chat, why do you feel like it's really important that you have an interesting main character for your story? I could tell you my answers, but I want to hear from you. If you're there and you can hear me, feel free to throw it in the comments. But honestly, in my experience, no matter how good a plot is, a reader won't continue the story if they do not like the main character, if they don't vibe with the main character, if the main character is not giving them a positive feeling, right? And like that's even true about villains, right? We love a villain. We love a villain story. Yeah, otherwise, why care what even happens to them? Literally, exactly, right? Like, how many of you have started a book and totally stopped reading it because you just felt like you couldn't relate to the MC, or you felt like they were totally boring, or that the MC was really freaking cliche, and you were like, oh my God, this whole story is about to be a huge cliche because literally this main character is a cliche. He's a walking cliche, or she is a walking cliche, right? My glasses. So yeah, I feel like that's happened to me multiple times, right? And sometimes this even happens where like you feel like you get like pieces of a character, but they almost don't feel real. It's like, oh, before the story started, I don't think this character actually existed, right? And that's not what we want. We want readers to really feel like they are our characters has this whole life that happened before the story even starts, right? So yeah, super, super important, right? We need to have really interesting main characters. So we have some nuggets in here for you, okay? So I really want to touch on I have to at least find a character that I can become, yes, invested in, right? Like you want to root for them, right, Fidel? Like I totally 1,000% agree. So yeah, I feel like when I work with writers who struggle with characters, they struggle really with like having that defined character arc or character journey. Where like we're like, okay, it's a little ambiguous, like where this character is starting. We don't really know what they've learned along the way, and then we don't really know like where they end up at the end of the story, right? Like we don't really have a defined ending for them because we haven't set up their arc properly, right? Or they feel like their characters are a little bland or one note on the page. And a lot of times I hear writers struggle with making their main characters stand out amongst their whole cast, which is so funny to me because I experienced this too. When I was writing my story, I had my main character, but like his crush, I was like, oh my God, I have a crush on her. Like, I wrote her so great. And I was so worried because I was like, how is my side character more interesting than my main character? Like, this is a problem. So, these are typical challenges that I see writers kind of like run into. Now, I'd love to hear, so these are from my experience working with writers, but I would love to hear from you guys who are tuned in. What have your biggest challenges been when it comes to creating your main character, a really solid MC? I would love to hear exactly what you guys feel like you are struggling with the most. I'd love to hear. As you guys like type a little bit, I think I'm going to get the party started with our character's name. Okay. We're kicking things off with our character's name, okay? Because this really sets the tone for who our character is. Most of the time, before we know anything else about a main character, especially from a reader's perspective, before we know anything about a main character, we hear their name first, right? So we want this name to really stand out. We want it to set the stage for like what this character is like and the story that's about to be told, right? So like thinking of characters that have stand out freaking names, right? We have Willy Wonka, silly, goofy. We have Huckleberry Finn. And then we have like my personal favorite. I'm not sure if you read this book. Nobody Owens. Literally a main character of a Neil Gaiman story called Graveyard. But he's actually referred to as Bod for most of the story, but his full name is Nobody Owens. And like Gaiman is a freaking master at naming his characters. Every single book I've ever read by him, he comes up with the most incredible names for his characters. But like think about a little boy named Nobody Owens. Literally, that is his name. What kind of boy do you think that he is? He's nobody, right? Like, so, okay. I'm just saying, Gaiman comes up with the best character names for his main characters. I could literally do a whole presentation on Gaiman and how he chooses names and how incredible they are. So I'm not going to do a dissertation for you guys here. But the point is that we want our characters' names to stand out and mean something about them, especially when we're writing fiction, right? So all that being said, Willy Wonka, a silly chocolatier, right? Like, I can't think of a better name for a silly chocolatier than Willy Wonka. We also love alliterations when it comes to character names. They tend to like stick in people's brains more. And like we have that identifying factor for that main character. They stand out, you hear their name, and you immediately know what story that they're from, right? And like I said, like Nobody Owens is a boy who was adopted and protected by ghosts in a graveyard after his family is murdered. Like, he is literally a nobody. And Gaiman does a really great job also at just like literally naming people words out of the dictionary. So like sometimes names are my biggest struggles for characters. Yes, Christina, they are tricky, right? But we want to think like, okay, what's the vibe I want to give this character, right? Like Willy Wonka's obviously a silly name for like a silly story, like a silly situation. Like the whole Willy Wonka factory is like all silly. So I know that like not everybody thinks it's silly. Some people think it's like a little dark, but to me, it's both. Like it's silly and it's dark. But Willy Wonka's name evokes this like silly, playful kind of vibe, right? Whereas Nobody Owens has a distinct vibe to it as well. Nobody Owens, he's a nobody, right? So I really think it's like, okay, what do I want the name to say about this character? Is this character really serious? Is this character really plain? Is this character super extra, right? Like, are they over the top? Are they the center of attention, right? Like, we want to give them names that really speak to who they are as characters. Christina, question for you. What genre are you writing? Are you a fantasy writer? Because I feel like fantasy writers struggle the most with picking really good names. So I'm just curious. But yeah, so what questions do we have about naming our characters? I love talking about Huckleberry Finn too, because he's like this boy who just wants to like have adventures in the forest, right? Yeah, your fantasy. Yeah, fantasy can be really tough, Christina, because like a lot of times we're using like names that are not really real, like we're making them up. They like tend to have almost like extra vowels or letters in weird places, silent letters. So that can always kind of be a little tricky. I would definitely try to focus on like, okay, what do I want to highlight about this character the most? What personality trait? And how can I really make that come across in their name, right? Like I could talk about Harry Potter too, right? Because like you hear that name, Harry Potter, and you're like, that's a boring ass freaking name, right? Like that's not a Willy Wonka kind of name. But there's always exceptions, right? But Harry Potter is a perfect name for a little boy who is growing up pretending to be normal, right? That's Harry's whole thing in the first book. When he moves in with the Dursleys, they want to have this facade that everything is normal. They're just a normal family living in a normal house with a normal kids, right? So like even that name, like it's not something that's like a Willy Wonka, really out there and silly and goofy, but it fits for his character. He's a quiet boy, very reserved. He wants to keep this normal facade, right? So we need to think about not only just like making a standout name, but also making sure that name really fits who our character is. Oh, I love this. I happen to like the nicknames people were given that I grew up with. So I keep a list of nicknames and birth names that I pull on based on geography, economics, and social status. That's a really great idea, Fidel. And I like that too, because you can always like spoof on them too, or like what's the masculine or feminine kind of version of this name? What would this name look like if it was, like gender neutral, those kinds of things. I'm a big fan of a gender neutral name. So like I use a lot of gender neutral protagonist names because I just really like them. But even as I do that, I'm always considering again, like how does this name fit this character the best, right? What am I trying to communicate to my reader about this character? And again, you nailed it here. Geography plays a part. Economics and status totally plays a part too. And sometimes I even like to like name characters like spoofed off of like other names that I've really heard and really enjoyed, right? Um, when you get into like fantasy names and things like that, I do think it's good to like look at other languages too, and try to use like maybe names or vowels or words even from other languages, because like then we still have the like these names, these words rooted in something real, right? But also they're very unique and they're very distinct. Oh yeah, period as well. Western, Renaissance, right? Like different time periods where we're writing, for sure. For sure. It's also something to consider. What other questions do we have about characters and their names? Because we definitely want to make sure that we are choosing great names for these guys. Feel free to throw your questions in the chat. I'm going to move on to my next point, which is a doozy, everyone. Doozy, doozy, doozy. Okay. This next piece is the character wound and misbelief, okay? So, this is probably the most important part of your main character, okay? Our wound or misbelief shows that our character has lived life, right? That they had a life before our story starts, but they are being held back in some way, okay? Whatever wound we give our main character, we need to write every conflict, every scene, every challenge that they experience in a way that presses right up against that wound, right? We want to challenge their beliefs. We want to put them into situations that will make them question everything that they know. It's a lot, right? But this ends up becoming central to the story because it's over the course of the story that your main character is attempting to heal this wound, to reconcile this misbelief, right? So that they can get what they want or desire by the end of the story, right? Because this wound, this misbelief is ultimately blah, 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 what is holding them back from achieving what it is that they really want, their true desires, their true goals, their true dreams, right? This is the wound that is keeping them from having all of that. So over the course of their adventure, over the course of their romance, right? Over the course of their mystery, they are constantly being challenged. This wound is constantly being poked and prodded and pressed, right? And it's forcing them ultimately to heal and change. So yes, the whole book is basically about them overcoming this wound. All right. And this also relates really closely with character arc. Okay. So that is really so important to the plot of our whole story. Okay. I could do a whole, like I said, a whole seminar on character plots, plot shapes, and character arcs. But I just don't have the time today. So we are covering all of those things way more in depth in the Creative Writers Collective. So I'm launching that at the end of this month. And we're starting fresh in June. I'm really excited. So in the Creative Writers Collective, we're going to dive a lot deeper on this stuff, this characterization stuff, where we get a lot deeper into the plot of the story and character arc and different genres that use different character arcs, because it is very important. Some notes about the wound, okay? Listen, Linda, listen. Even if our MC is fucked up, we still need the reader to like them, okay? I did not make this rule up. If you've ever read Save the Cat Writes a Novel, I think the author's name is Jessica Brody. Don't quote me on that, but I'm 99% sure. She writes in Save the Cat Writes a Novel that we want to like the main character for whatever reason, okay? And we should set this up at the very beginning of the story. This should happen in Act 1, okay? So even if our wound makes our character a total dickhead, right? Maybe they still get a kitten out of a tree. Oh my goodness, excuse me. Even if our MC has issues, has baggage, is not a great person or citizen or like part of humanity, we still need them to have some redeeming qualities. And I will say, if we don't think that we can get our reader to like them, we can always get the reader to feel bad for them. And that's kind of the same thing, especially if we're writing from a point of view of a villain, right? Which some of us do end up doing in our stories, taking on the villain's POV. So sometimes it's like, oh shit, well, like I'm writing from an evil character. How do I still get my reader to like them? And it really comes down to like, we can make our reader feel at least bad for them or see where they are coming from. Why is it that they are doing the things they're doing? What has made them the way that they are? A lot of times it's a sad story, which is how we can kind of get away with maybe not having the reader love our main character, but at least feel bad for them. And kind of what we were saying earlier, be interested in them and become invested in them, right? So this is really, really key, totally key, okay? Another note about the wound, okay? The character may be aware of the wound or they could be unaware of it. Especially in YA, when we're like dealing with younger protagonists, they may not be acutely aware of their wound specifically or how it's holding them back. But even in a YA novel, the MC should probably become aware of these wounds over the course of the story as they're being tested. But they don't always need to be super aware of their wounds right off the bat, okay? And then the last piece is, how can we tie the wound of our MC into their greatest fears? How are these things related, right? How is the way that they've been wounded, the misbelief that they have about themselves or the world, how is it related to their greatest fears, right? And we constantly, this sounds so terrible, we constantly want to be putting our character in a place where they must confront their greatest fears. This is story. This is why we love story. We want to see the deepest and darkest and scariest parts of a person's soul, right? And how they overcome them. That is what we love about stories. I literally could talk about this character wound for hours. I could go real nerdy, real deep, but I'm not going to do that to you guys today. If you have questions about the character wound or the character misbelief, throw them in the comments and I will totally circle back around to them. But guys, like this is central to your plot. This is central to who your character is at the beginning, but also central to who your character becomes by the end of your story. We want to see this character heal this wound. We want to see them grow, right? And the other piece is that like even as they heal one wound, another wound or misbelief may arise, right? So like even though we have a character who ends up maybe like discovering how like self-discovery, maybe they are finally discovering who they are, maybe they're getting freedom for the first time and really able to kind of say, this is who I freaking am, right? But along with that, they lose a lot of relationships, right? And now they're forced to kind of take their next story, take the next chapter of their life alone, whereas before they had a family, they had support behind them, right? So like as they gain things from healing this wound, they may also lose things, right? So it's important that we hit on both because this is the very human part of writing stories. Fidel said, like plants and animals and bacteria that have ill effects, they can all serve useful benefits. I try to expose that in my worst characters. Yeah, totally. I think it's always a balance, right? Because like even in our antagonistic characters, we still want to again show their humanity, right? Like in the same way that we don't want a cliche like saves the day hero, he can do it all, right? Like the same way we don't want that guy, that superhero who is like selfless and has to do everything alone, like that total cliche. We want our heroes to have depth too, right? Like even the greatest heroes have fears and doubts and struggles, right? And you need to think about our antagonists in the same way. They have their bad parts, sure, but they also have to have like some other type of qualities to them. They're not all bad, right? Maybe they love their cats. Maybe they freaking love needle pointing, right? Like they have other redeeming qualities besides just being evil. And again, to me, like having a character who's evil just for the sake of being evil feels very cliche, feels very one dimensional. And that's kind of what we don't want. We want our characters to be multi-dimensional and have multiple sides to them. So we need to expose all of them. Even if they're not great, right? They all have useful benefits. That was a great point, Fidel. Okay, so now I want to give you guys, because I freaking love you, 3 tips for how to build your characters, okay? So one thing that I actually talked about in another masterclass that I did, it was my masterclass on descriptions. I had mentioned how like sometimes your MC is discovered through the writing of the story, right? Because like I think sometimes we have such a crystal clear vision of who our side characters are, and they're not going through the same massive transformation that our MC is a lot of the time. So what I like to do is, okay, if our MC is feeling a little bland, that is okay, especially in the first draft of your story. Because I truly, truly believe that like a lot of times we discover so much of who our main character is as we're writing the first draft of our story. So if you are in this place right now where you're like in the first draft of your story, you're like, my main character is flat as a freaking board and so damn boring, right? It's okay. We don't have to panic. But I do want to give you 3 tips for how to build your characters over the course of the story, okay? So my first tip for building your character is by being explicit about their motivations and their actions, okay? For me, it's not just about what they do. It's not about making the decision to do something, right? Because we can see that with anything, like any medium, we can see a character decide to do something and take action, right? We see it in movies. We can see that in video games, right? Like we just see characters taking action, okay? It's not always about what they are doing, but about why they are doing it. So freaking important, right? If we have a character who is a good character, right? We want them to be a good character. Or we even have a character who's like good, but maybe being swayed to more antagonistic forces, right? We want to know what's driving their decisions, right? Is it from a place of fear that's driving their decisions? Is it from a place of lack or low self-worth that's driving their decisions? Is it because they want fame or glory? Like we need to know this about the character because it really defines who they are on the inside. Not just about what they're doing externally, but what is driving them to do it internally. So freaking important because the goal is, right, as our character heals this wound, their motivations for doing certain things will change. And that change in motivations shows our character's growth, right? Maybe at the beginning they were doing things because they wanted fame and glory and to be remembered and important, right? But by the end of the story, their motivation is no longer to be remembered, to be revered. Their motivation is now to do what is right because it is the right thing to do. Right? Do we see how that can really show a character changing over the course of a story when we're explicit about not just what they're doing, not just the action they take, but why it is that they're taking it? 2 here. Another tip for building characters, this seems silly, but it's really an underutilized tool. So one way we can build characters is by describing them, of course. So descriptions about our MC should, again, we want to be intentional. I say this all of the time when I am working with clients, when I am doing these workshops. We want to be so intentional about every detail that we put in our stories, but especially when it comes to describing a main character, okay? So, for example, we have Harry Potter's scar, right? That shows about his past, about his history. It means something about him. He is the chosen one, right? We have Nemo. I had to throw my boy Nemo in there and his little fin, right? Um, he is held back by this little fin by thinking that he just can't do what other fish can do. And that ultimately is what gets him caught and taken to Wallaby Way, Sydney. I can't remember the numbers. I really wanted to, though. It would have been hilarious. But okay, so yeah, Nemo has his little fin. What does that mean about him? What does that mean about the plot, right? And me, I wrote my main character to be so tall he doesn't even fit through doors. And it's so funny. I wrote him in like kind of I can't think of the word right now. I wrote him to be a lot like my boyfriend right now, who is 7 feet tall and has trouble fitting through doors. So I wrote that for him. So, like, what does that mean about who this character is? Larger than life, right? Who is this person? Why is this an important detail to mention, right? What do these traits tell us about the character of our main character? What does it tell us about who this person really is? Okay. And yeah, we want to focus on descriptions that really pack the biggest punch. And I don't want you to forget that the same way we use descriptions to describe settings, to describe food, we can use those same senses to help describe our character, right? What do they smell like? If they're kissing somebody, what does their breath taste like? I want to encourage you to use all of the senses when you're talking about your character. How can we really make them come alive on the page? I want your reader to be able to smell the raw onion that your character smells like after sweating for a week, right? Like, I want them to know that smell. But yes, anyways, my point is to make sure that we are choosing descriptions, choosing character traits that tell us a whole heck of a lot about who this character is. And also, kind of like Fidel said earlier, about their social status, about their economic status, about their, maybe like about their geography, right? How about their date of birth, right? Or like the era that they're in. How can we use these descriptions to really enhance all of those things? Really important. And the last tip I have for you is, okay, so this is kind of a biggie. This is a biggie. So my last tip for you about building characters, okay? We want to build them by using examples, small anecdotes, and little flashback vignettes, okay? So, for example, when your main character recalls something or states something as the truth, it's good to give us some contextual information on where that reaction, where that rationalization, where does that come from, right? So we want to show the reader, again, this is another way to really make our characters seem real. We want to make the reader know that there is life that has happened for this character outside of this story, right? So for example, if I was to say to you, my father was easygoing about religion, right away you should follow up by saying I want an example, right? How did it show? How did your dad being easygoing about religion, how did that show up outside of this story, right? So that's really, 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 really important, right? We want to be building them up in that way, okay? So maybe you say, my father was easygoing about religion, right? That is the line. Well, then I'm likely to think for a minute and then say, if somebody was like, give me an example, how did you know that, right? You could think for a minute and then follow this up by saying, my father was easygoing about religion. Every spring when the mission sisters came around to our little town to teach Catholicism, my father let my brother and me duck out to play baseball, right? So that's just a little story that we're like, oh, okay, like it shows us how the character came to this conclusion that their father was easygoing about religion, right? And you could go even a little bit deeper, right? One day the nuns came to the house and asked him why we weren't in class. And my dad said, well, sister, you know, my boys know a lot about religion, but they don't know how to execute a double play, right? So they got to know how to do that too. So those kinds of little character moments are so great. How are we coming to these conclusions, right? Show us examples outside of the story. Show us these small anecdotes that really show us instead of just telling us, right? And these little flashback vignettes, right? We have this line about a dad being easygoing about religion. So, like, bring us back. Like, what was that moment when you decided, like, oh, he's very easygoing about this, right? You know, no matter what time of year it was, if I had a soccer game, my dad would let me skip out on church in favor of soccer, right? So, really dig a little bit deeper and try to give us that contextual information. It is so important because it really builds your character over the course of the story. And again, we get to see them outside of just this one challenge, this one event, this one piece of their lives. And it makes us feel like they are really a holistic character that's existed long before the story started and will exist long before or long after the story's over, right? Yeah, foundation. It really is because it's like showing us, okay, what is the stuff that has made our character believe these things? How did our character draw this conclusion, right? It gives us a little bit more insight into our character and how they see the world, right? And that's ultimately why we love stories. That's ultimately why we love freaking characters, right? And to bring this home, that is what readers freaking love about characters. They don't love a character because they're handsome. They don't love a character because they're chiseled, right? They don't even love a character because they're a good guy. There's plenty of readers who love bad guys. We love a character because we see their soul. We love a character because we see all of them, even the not so good bits, even the challenging bits, but we get to see who they are and what has shaped them into the person that we then get to read. That is why we love characters. That is why readers are obsessed with certain characters, because it's not even about who the character is, it's about what they've gotten to see on the inside of that character. I can think of like 5 characters offhand that I freaking loved, not because I could like picture how they looked, but because I literally saw their soul on a page of a book and was like, I love them. When you see someone so completely, all of these pieces that make them up, you can't help but totally fall in love with them. Fidel said, or an earlier misdeed comes back to haunt them after they strive to evolve. Yes, so that is going back to our character wound. Absolutely, Fidel. So when we're talking about that character wound, right? Like something that they might have fucked up on earlier in the story comes back to haunt them, right? They do make mistakes. These characters are not perfect. They are learning. They will fumble. They will fuck up, right? How do these mistakes come back to haunt them later on, right? That's a really great point, Fidel. And yeah, this is all about the foundations, guys. This is all about giving you the foundational stuff to help start building your character and say, okay, even if my main character isn't not how I want them to be for the whole story yet, these things will get you there. Being explicit about their motivations and actions will help you get there. Describing them and being really detailed and specific and intentional about the descriptions will ultimately help you get there. And really help you start saying, okay, who is this person, right? What is this person really about? How can I make this person stand out in a physical way, right? And using these small anecdotes, these small examples, these flashback vignettes, build your character so much. Not just in this story on the page now, but to say who they are as a person in general. Gives us a bigger view, a bigger picture of our character than outside this specific moment, right? We get to see a lot more of their life experience, their lived experience. And again, that is the stuff, the juicy stuff that readers just, they flip to see. how are we feeling after this little live? I love talking about character because I am such a big fan of having active characters. This is another really big, potent, important tip. Having your characters be active. Let your main characters go after things. Let them pursue things. We want our characters to move the plot forward instead of having the plot move our characters. Okay? Okay. So, guys, this is a very, 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 very brief look at how, like we create really solid characters. Very brief, okay? Now, in the Creative Writers Collective, we are covering how to create characters that readers freaking love, okay? If you want to be involved in the Creative Writers Collective, now is the time to join, okay? If you have been around me, around my world, you know that I am super focused on giving you the foundational information that is impactful, that is potent, that is easily applicable to your story so that you can start making immediate changes, okay, to your writing that will instantly elevate your freaking work, okay? My goal is impact. What changes will give you the biggest, most beneficial impact, okay? So if you like these trainings, you're enjoying these masterclasses, I want you to know that the collective is literally full of them, plus extra bonus modules, plus monthly challenges that are meant to help you immediately apply the things that you are learning right to your story, right to our work, okay? So yeah, you get minimally 12 masterclasses. And like I said, if you know me, my masterclasses, my programs, sometimes they go a day. Most of them go 2 days, sometimes 3, 4, who knows? But you will have access to all of them as part of the collective, okay? I am a huge fan of knowledge, but I believe that knowledge needs to be applied. Awesome. Thanks so much, Fidel. I appreciate you being here. I really believe that knowledge needs to be applied, okay? We can have all of the knowledge in the world, but to make it really count, we need to quickly apply it, right? This is how we make tangible forward progress in the right direction, not just progressing for the sake of pushing things forward, right? In my experience, progress does not come by waiting. Progress does not come by waiting. It doesn't come by waiting for the right time. It doesn't come by waiting for the perfect idea. It doesn't come by waiting for the most incredible or perfect set of circumstances, right? I know 0 writers who have said, I finished this book because it was the perfect time, because it was the perfect idea. No, honey. They finished that book because they committed to finishing that book. They could finish that book because they committed to learning, they committed to showing up, and they committed to being there and getting the work done day in and day out, okay? This is how we grow. This is how we take our writing to the next level, okay? We need to constantly be pushing ourselves outside of our comfort zone, learning more, and then applying what we learn immediately to our story, to our writing, okay? This is how we make quantum leaps. This is how we elevate our story from being good enough to freaking amazing, flying off shelves, okay? You don't want to be begging people to read your story. You want readers begging to read your story, right? This is how we do it. We focus on the storytelling, we focus on the craft, and we focus on accountability and freaking support, okay? You will have all of the tools, plus weekly writing sprints, plus a community of other really dedicated writers there to give you motivation, to give you advice, to give you support, to be your biggest freaking cheerleaders, okay? Because writing is freaking hard, and it's way harder when we work on our stories in a vacuum totally alone, okay? Yeah, guys, I'm so freaking jazzed about the collective. I'm literally so excited because I know how much this can do for all of your stories, for all of your author platforms when you do freaking finish and you do decide to self publish or you do start pursuing a publishing company, right? We want to set you up for freaking success, okay? We want it to be the easiest process. So all you have to do is sit down and write. You know exactly what to do. You have a game plan set up and you have a group of support, a community of support. So if you do have questions, if things do get confusing or overwhelming, you know where you can go to always get answers. All right. So beauties, beautifuls, I love you so much. I am going to post the June syllabus for the collective in the comments so that you can check it out. And I also want to post links down below for this super special early bird collective price, okay? So early bird for the collective, juicy, juicy stuff. So if you pay in full for 12 months of the collective, so that's monthly, right, monthly master classes, monthly book club meetings, monthly challenges with freaking prizes. I'm so excited to drop and announce these prizes, guys. They're gonna blow your mind. But we have monthly challenges with prizes, and we also have weekly writing sprints. So we meet once a week, write for 20 minutes, and we just make that time about us, about showing up for us, about showing up as a community, and about making this time for ourselves. So all of that, if you pay in full, you'll be saving over $300, which is a huge, lovely savings. And I know that pay in full is not realistic for everyone. So there's also a pay as you go option. For this option, there is a $199 buy-in fee, but then you are only paying $99 a month after that for every class, every program, all of the challenges, and all of the bonus content, all of the other meetings, all of the other guest speakers, which I have the most exciting guest speaker lineup. I cannot wait to share it with you guys. But secrets, hype. I can't let all the cats out of the bag this early, okay? But it's really freaking exciting, okay? If you know me, you know my master classes sometimes last, like I said, weeks. They could. And they can sell for up to $600 for one freaking class. So you are potentially getting every single class every month for the lowest possible price, the highest possible savings. And I know that going through these months in the collective will get you to the finished book that you want, to the author platform that you want, so that, again, you are not begging people to read your book. Readers are knocking your down to read your story, okay? Now is the time to move. I am a mover. I do not wait. When I decide I am about something, I make it freaking happen. And those are the kind of people that I want this space to be for. You're ready to take your writing to the next level. You're ready to stop dicking around. You're ready to elevate yourself and your platform to be something that is going to blow readers' minds, to stand out amongst the crowd, and to be able to be the well-paid writer that you want to be, that I freaking want you to be, okay? I love you guys. Thank you so much for being here and hanging out with me. You're all freaking amazing. I will be back tomorrow with another live. I will let y'all know the time, depending on, we're supposed to get more storms tomorrow. I don't know when they're going to hit now, but again, like I said in the beginning, we are right around the corner from hurricane season over here. So I will keep you posted about the time for tomorrow, but I love you. I will definitely be here, and I can't wait to see you guys again. Also, thank you so much for being a part of this community. Watching it grow has been one of the biggest joys of my freaking life. I love all of you. I appreciate you being here. Have an amazing, magical Tuesday. Tuesday? Okay, yeah, it's Tuesday. Oh, yay. Thought it was Wednesday for a second. All right, love you. Bye.